Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Buhay. Let's start with the latest developments in Ukraine over the past week. One of the most significant reforms in the history of independent Ukraine. On July 1st, the land market was officially launched in Ukraine. After a 20-year-long moratorium on land sales, citizens got the right to freely manage or sell their land plots. The first stage of the reform will last till year 2024 with severe restrictions. Namely, only citizens of Ukraine have a right to purchase a land plot, and its area should not exceed 100 hectares. Nevertheless, in MP's opinion, in spite of the restrictions, the land market is going to significantly increase the effectiveness of the Ukrainian agricultural sector.
In the nearest 5 or 10 years, we expect the dynamics of Ukrainian agriculture development to increase 2 or 3 times. The yield per hectare is going to increase as well because of the increase in competition and in rental payments. The conditions would be formed for everyone to strive to earn more. We have a great potential because our average yield capacity is considerably lower than European. Therefore, we'll get additional investments into infrastructure. This means additional money everywhere. We are guarantors of food security for dozens of the states around the globe. Our agricultural sector is likely to become a driving factor for at least 1% of the yearly GDP growth. The main goal is to develop everything and improve infrastructure. That is, the development of high-tech industries and increase of the competitiveness of the domestic goods producer.
Judicial reform in Ukraine. On June 30th, the parliament approved the restart of the High Qualification Commission of Judges. The bill was supported in the second reading. Now it is necessary to form the commission. Our correspondents found out who is going to be included in it and how the selection system is organized.
International experts were allowed to participate in the selection of members of the Supreme Qualification Commission of Judges. This is said to help Ukraine combat corruption. 293 members of parliament voted for the corresponding decision.
293 votes for. The law is approved.
There will be 6 people in the competition committee. 3 of them are assigned by the Council of Judges of Ukraine, while the rest are independent international experts.
Taking into account our Ukrainian experience, our international partners have a certain level of mistrust to Ukraine for implementation of reforms. Let's be frank, we cultivated mistrust through our actions. That is why they insist that the commission, which appoints the members of the High Qualification Commission, is formed with the participation of foreign experts.
MPs state the foreign experts are needed to make the selection of the High Qualification Commission independent from the authorities and oligarchs.
All insinuations that we are going some wrong way should be rejected. We will make a variant of reforming the judicial system that will allow cleaning up the system as quickly, effectively and efficiently as possible, and that will improve the quality of judges' work.
The High Qualification Commission formed under this law is planned to begin the selection and recertification of Ukrainian judges. The country lacks them now. There are about 2,000 corresponding vacancies in Ukraine.
We expect that within a month after the law is signed, proposals will be sent from the Council of Judges and from international organizations in order to form a competition commission. The competition commission will be completely autonomous in its activities and independent from the High Council of Justice. It will form rules and procedures for this competition.
There were over 500 amendments to the bill on restarting the High Qualification Commission of Judges of Ukraine.
No checks and balances system, no balance at all. This is a complete imbalance. Exclude the rules that directly favor one of the parties. Unfortunately, the proposal is unconstitutional.
But the MPs still managed to consider them in 2 sessions, and the President of Ukraine welcomed the decision of the parliament. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Artem Holub, UATV News.
315 MPs supported the presidential amendments to the law on punishment for lying in the declaration of assets and incomes. The president vetoed the previous version of the law, all because of the edits that made it possible to hide one's property given it was registered to a family member. The MP stressed on the extreme importance of excluding such a possibility from legislation.
The president determined that responsibility should be very strict. It should provide for imprisonment, firstly, and the president always spoke for this. When the bill was approved in the second reading, the obligation to declare one's assets was distorted by some amendments. Because of a family member who did not provide information that he or she has some kind of real estate or money, the subject of declaration was able to refer to the fact that he did not receive the relevant information from his relative, and this could be done to avoid punishment.
28 million square meters, or 200 Olympic stadiums in Kiev. This is the total area different abandoned objects occupy in Ukraine. The state has already created special groups to form the list of buildings and territories which have not been appropriately used for a long time, but which could generate profit, they say in the State Property Fund, that after being privatized, those objects are likely to attract investments to local budgets and create new jobs.
We believe that those interested in steady development of their regions, those who see the abandoned objects with their own eyes every day, they understand that those buildings can become areas of growth. Such people stand for selling those objects to turn them into perspective zones at private investors' expense.
Small business protested in the center of the capital. Entrepreneurs demanded the MPs to let them work, namely to cancel the quarantine restrictions for small businesses and the obligatory transition to cash registers. The protesters staged an action on the Independence Square. They wanted to carry coffins with flowers near the president's office and leave them near the Verkhovna Rada building. However, the movement of the column was blocked by law enforcement officers. Clashes between the protesters and the police also took place.
At present, 3 directions of the micro-business are dead, so to say. Those are small household equipment distributors, family drugstores, mostly in villages, and small jewelers. And these 3 coffins are a symbol of current authorities' activities aimed at annihilation of micro-businesses. We have cancelled the cashback, which earlier frightened the businessman. It was foreseen by the law and the constitutional majority supported it. I've talked to some representatives of the protesters. We have to just introduce a couple of amendments to the bill to make it suit the reality and its demands.
Ukraine has imposed restrictions on visitors due to the Delta strain of coronavirus. Starting July 2nd, everyone who arrives from Russia, India, Great Britain and Portugal are required to undergo express testing at the border. In case of a positive result, they are subject to mandatory self-isolation or observation. Such requirements were introduced by the Cabinet of Ministers in order not to allow the spread of the aggressive mutation of the coronavirus. In the future, depending on the epidemic situation, the list of countries with the most intensive spread of the Delta strain will be revised. The largest international military drills, Sea Breeze 2021, are being held in Ukraine. Over 5,000 servicemen, 32 ships, 40 aircraft and 18 groups of divers from 29 countries of the world participate in them. The drills are taking place in the international waters of the Black Sea, as well as in Odessa, Mykolaiv and Kherson regions of Ukraine. The military exchange experience in conducting search and rescue operations, land maneuvers and air defense. 2 Island-class boats and the Neptune missile system will take part in the Sea Breeze from the Ukrainian side.
We have now the largest number of participating countries since 1997, 5 continents of the world. During the Sea Breeze drills, 2 self-assessments of 2 island-type patrol boats, Slovyansk and Starobilsk, will be carried out according to NATO standards, a self-assessment of a marine troop according to NATO standards, as well as training of a team of Unit 701 according to NATO standards.
Opportunity to interoperate between nations in the Black Sea, and it's not just confined to operations at sea, but also in the air, on the land, and as you mentioned, diving and salvage operations. So Sea Breeze represents a broad opportunity across many areas to build partnerships in the region.
Mines, ammunition and other explosives are the main cause of deaths of civilians in Donbas. The OSCE representatives recorded at least 34,000 mines on the territory of Donetsk and Luhansk regions on both sides of the contact line. Our correspondent found out who is hindering the complete safety of these areas and how long will it take to completely demine the Donbas.
Humanitarian disaster. Ukraine occupies one of the first places in the world in terms of mine danger, the UN states. According to the official data, about 7,000 square kilometers of territories in Donbas on both sides of the contact line are filled with mines.
What can be translated of having 1 million football fields full of these anti-personnel mines and other explosive ordnance. Therefore, the problem that we are confronting is huge and will be not solved in the next, unfortunately, in the next few days, weeks, months, or year.
Almost 2 million civilians now live in the dangerous areas of eastern Ukraine and Donbas. Every 10th of them is a child. According to the latest report by the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, from November of 2019 to June of 2021, 23 civilians in Donbas were killed by mines. 74 people were injured.
These objects accounted for nearly twice the number of fatalities as shelling and small arms fire combined. This is in particular due to the implementation of the additional measures in July 2020 that were agreed in the Trilateral Contact Group on the 22nd of July of last year. Ever since, the mission has observed a downward trend in shelling and small arms fire incidents throughout last year. Nonetheless, 37 civilians were killed or injured due to mines, ammunition, and other explosives during this period.
In order to reduce the number of victims, Ukrainian sappers, supported by international organizations, continue demining the territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions controlled by Ukraine. They also work with local residents, carry out explanatory work both among adults and children.
We have been trying to support as much as we can the mining, but also the rising awareness to those who are living close to those contaminated areas. And at least 10,000 children has been already educated and they are aware of this issue. 200 institutions, education institutions, has been also benefits of this program.
The most complicated situation with mines is observed along the contact line. In order for the sappers to work there, they have to receive security guarantees. The Trilateral Contact Group has been trying for months to identify the areas of demining. During the last meeting, Russia blocked this process, they say in the TCG.
Our delegation came up with an initiative, and the day before, the subgroup on security has finally agreed on the areas for demining. Moreover, most of them are associated with the checkpoints and ensure the safety of the checkpoints, primarily for citizens crossing from the other side. Some of them are coordinated with critical infrastructure facilities, which deals with gas and water supply. But the Russians are blocking this agreement and practical actions in relation to it.
Experts say even if illegal armed groups stop shelling and sappers can start demining, it will take about 40 years to completely clear the territory of Donetsk and Luhansk regions from explosive objects on both sides of the contact line. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Yulia Kruchkova, UATV News.
Ukraine rejects any negotiation with any representative of the occupation administration. This was stated by Vice Prime Minister for Reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, in an interview. Our partners from the United States of America are welcome at the Normandy Format Summit in an extended format, he noted.
If the Russian side calls them and declares them members of the Russian delegation, we will only applaud. Thus, Russia will finally confirm for the entire world community who is who. The Russians can invite those representatives dozens of times, saying they are independent players, but no one will ever give them a visa or will allow them enter the country. Because they are not subjective. I can criticize our partners, but I assure you, the question of who are the parties of the conflict and their identity is not discussed.
Residents of the territories temporarily uncontrolled by Kiev are not willing to join the military groups in Donetsk and Luhansk. Illegal armed groups controlled by the Kremlin organize these so-called military camps. Why do Ukrainians no longer want to remain there? And why is Russia trying to enforce issuance of its passports in Donbas? My colleagues found out.
Drills or fine. The Kremlin-controlled illegal armed groups have announced the next drafting of the so-called reservists. For this, the professional Russian military personnel arrived at the training grounds in Donetsk and Luhansk. But there is a lack of those willing to participate in drills. The occupation administration started looking for a way to force local residents to arrive to the training camps. And they found it.
There was a low level of military liable reservists to participate in the period stages of gathering of reservists on June 17th, 19th and 22nd, 26th, 2021. The Russian occupation administrations initiated the introduction of fines in the amount of 30,000 rubles for the absence in the so-called DPR passport of a stamp about placement of a citizen on military register.
It is this stamp on military registration that is the main condition for obtaining a Russian passport. In case a resident of the uncontrolled territories refuses it, he is likely to lose job, the opportunity to receive treatment or leave the territory. The Kremlin, on the other hand, has its own plans for people who were forced to obtain Russian citizenship.
It is very difficult for people to live there and make a choice between how to survive and how to pay for survival. That is against the background of the fact that passports are issued. They don't mean that one is indeed in Russia. Kremlin needs them to show that there are allegedly Russian citizens in the occupied parts of Ukraine, and Russia will fight for them.
Blackmailing, threats and fines. There are no other ways for occupation administrations and commanders of the illegal armed groups to force residents of the territories uncontrolled by Kiev participate in the warfare.
Совершенно очевидно, что жители
It is quite obvious that over the past 8 years, residents of the so-called republics in the territories of Donbas, temporarily uncontrolled by Ukraine, have become convinced that the way proposed by Russia and its leaders is a complete dead end. No one wants to serve them. They have the only opportunity to maintain the army that has received money from Russia and to use some kind of repression, fines or criminal prosecution.
Over the past 7 years, almost 500,000 residents of the territories of Luhansk and Donetsk regions uncontrolled by Ukraine were forced to obtain Russian citizenship. The occupation administrations have the Kremlin's support. Besides, the process was sped up on the eve of the elections in the Russian Federation. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Tatiana Suli, UATV News.
On the International Day in support of victims of torture, calls are loudly voiced around the world for a complete ban of all types of cruel, inhuman and humiliating treatment. The international community is paying special attention to the victims of violence in the territories uncontrolled by Ukraine. Human rights activists say the situation there is close to disaster.
My father did not kill anyone. He has never done harm to anyone. He loves our people and our family very much.
Safiya and Bekir have not seen their father for 5 years. They are children of Amir Hussein Kuku. The day of February 11th, 2016 was fatal for the family. Crimean human rights activist was detained on his way to work. This detention was the second for him, but this time it was followed by an arrest at a pre-trial detention facility. Maryam, the wife of the human rights activist, says her husband was stunned with blows to the head from behind. They tried to grab a folder with the documents and his phone.
11 февраля 2016 года.
On February 11, 2016, there was a second search, absolutely outrageous. Security services broke down the door. It was terrible.
This is just one case. 74 people are under investigation and have already been convicted in the so-called case of Hizb ut-Tahrir. Most of them are kept in the conditions dangerous to one's health and even life. But even more catastrophic is the situation in prisons on the temporarily uncontrolled territories of eastern Ukraine. 1 in 4 has been sexually assaulted there, and this number is significantly underestimated, human rights activists say.
As for the people who are being detained and are in places of imprisonment, this also applies to not only those who find themselves in places of deprivation of liberty. Violence has intensified for people who are not kept in custody, and this is indeed a very big problem.
These photos from the territories temporarily uncontrolled by Kyiv surprised the public at the beginning of the year. These are the torture chambers of the secret prison Izolatia of the illegal armed groups. Their prisoners are tortured in different ways. Those who have been there call this prison a concentration camp, but it is difficult to obtain evidence.
The situation is the following. We have a part of the territory that is occupied. It is under the control of the Russian Federation. We cannot go there. We cannot talk to witnesses. We cannot talk to people who have suffered from violence until they manage to leave to the territory controlled by Ukraine.
And in fact, evidence of violence in the Russian-occupied Crimea and in the uncontrolled parts of Donbas are collected by human rights activists. This is a very difficult, anonymous and thorough process. All the data gathered will become materials of lawsuits to the international courts and is aimed at bringing all those responsible to justice. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Dina Nasonenko, UATV News.
Up next, Ukraine at the World Film Festival. 2 movies by Ukrainian directors will be demonstrated on the screens of the 74th Cannes Film Festival this year. The Week of Criticism program will include a feature film, Olga by Eli Grappa, while the documentary Babyn Yar Context by Serhiy Loznytsia participates in this special screening. One of the main cinema events will begin on July 6. Together with the festival program, one of the most prestigious international film markets, Marché du Film, will operate, and for the 15th time, Ukraine will be represented by a national pavilion. All roads lead to Rome. For the first time in history, the Ukrainian national football team reached the quarterfinals of the European Championship. In the 8th match of Euro 2020, Andriy Shevchenko's team defeated the Swedish national team, and on July 3rd, they are going to play in Rome with one of the strongest teams in the world, the national team of England. My colleagues have witnessed the emotions of the fans, authors of the goals, and the head coach of the Ukrainian national team.
It was a deep night in Kyiv, but the fans of the Ukrainian national football team could not calm down the joy of a difficult but a very desired victory.
We love our team. We believe in it. Glory to Ukraine.
Alexander Zinchenko opened the scoring on the 27th minute of the match and became the youngest player in the history of the Ukrainian national team to score at a European Championship. Zinchenko was 24 years and 196 days old.
We're making history and the whole country supports us. Of course, we will try to do everything possible in order to get the desired result and go to the next stage.
Emil Forsberg equalized 2 minutes before the end of the first half. The main time of the match ended with a 1-1 score. By the end of the extra time, Artem Dovbyk scored his debut goal for the national team with a pass from Zinchenko. He brought victory to the Ukrainian team and paved way to the quarterfinals of Euro 2020.
It's incredible because this is my first international goal and it was so important. Therefore, this victory is very important for us and for the entire country.
Unfortunately, Artem Besedin will no longer be able to play for the Ukrainian team at Euro 2020. In extra time, the striker received a strong blow to the leg from the Swede Danielsson. Besedin left the field with the help of doctors. An examination in Kyiv where the football player was taken showed a partial tear of cruciate and lateral ligaments, as well as serious damage of the appendage of the shin bone.
We are upset with this moment. We all support him. He's together with us. The guys will play against England for him.
The quarter-final match of Euro 2020 England-Ukraine takes place on July the 3rd in Rome at Stadio Olimpico. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Olena Diduch, UATV News.
The first aviation museum was created by enthusiasts near Odessa. They collect old military aircraft. Tourists will be able to not only see the rare equipment, but also sit in the cockpit, as well as test themselves on the MiG fighter simulator. The museum will officially open in September. My colleagues have seen the future exposition.
It is the heaviest aircraft in our collection with a complete package. The engine is here, as well as the all equipment.
Valery is one of a group of Odessa aviators who are saving military MiG fighters from disposal. They transport each plane to the territory of the suburban sports airfield Hydroport. It is located 16 kilometers away from Odessa. The oldest exhibit is over 70 years old. Each of the planes has its own story.
There are quite significant models here. There you can see the Su-24, which is not really a production aircraft. It was a flying laboratory that tested some of the equipment systems. The Su-9 aircraft, which was recently brought here from Genichesk, is also a very rare model. There are no such planes even in Giuliani Museum in Kyiv.
The museum will start working in September. By this time, all military aircraft will be installed on the foundation. Tourists will be offered to sit in the cockpit of combat vehicles, as well as virtually fly on a fighter simulator. In the meantime, curious residents of Odessa are looking at the aircraft through the airfield fence.
Excellent and amazing. There are many museum pieces that I have never seen. It was not possible earlier. History should be preserved so that our children could see how it was before.
Odessa enthusiasts have gathered 10 planes in their collection. A MiG alley was created for them in the museum. The pilots are confident that by the end of the year there will be more winged combat vehicles here. Now a group of specialists is negotiating with Odessa Aviation plant on the transfer of one more rare aircraft to the museum. Reported by Vadim Kramer, Anna Hordentseva, Andersen Podosyan, UATV News.
That was our final story this week. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter pages.